The jungle screamed. Zola, a 4-ton matriarch, whipped her head toward the sound. Her calf Tumo, barely weaned, thrashed in a nightmare of scales. Nagendra, a 24-foot anaconda, had struck from the reeds. His coils pulsed like a living vice around Tumo's ribs. The baby's panicked trumpets tore through the afternoon haze. Zola charged, her roar shaking the acacia trees. But the serpent didn't flinch. Ranger Arlo Mitchell, hidden in the blind, froze. His 30 years in the bush hadn't prepared him for this. The ground vibrated as Zola skidded to a stop. One wrong move could crush Tumo. Nagendra's cold eyes locked onto hers. This wasn't hunger. This was war. Nagendra hadn't eaten since the dry season. His last meal, a young tapir, had lasted a week. Now desperation overrode sense. Elephant calves were taboo, but Tumo's stumble into the marsh had been too tempting. The snake's muscles flexed, each coil sinking with Tumo's weakening exhales. Zola circled, her trunk slashing air. She remembered Tumo's first steps, how he'd wobbled into her shadow. Now that same baby gasped as Nagendra's grip reached his diaphragm. Somewhere, a hyena cackled, nature's cruel audience. Arlo's radio crackled with static. No backup, no tranks, just a mother and a monster in a fight that would leave only one standing. Nagendra's jaw stretched wider, not to bite, but to smother.
Tumo's vision blurred. The world narrowed to Nagendra's diamond-patterned scales grinding into his ribs. He wheezed, a wet, broken sound. Zola's ears flared. She'd seen bulls die like this, their lungs collapsed by pythons, but this was her child. She slammed her foot down, shaking the earth. Nagendra hissed, his tail lashing mud. One wrong strike would snap Tumo's spine. Arlo's knuckles whitened on his rifle. He could shoot, but the bullet might ricochet. Tumo's legs kicked weakly. Zola's mind raced. She'd flipped lions before, but this? The snake's weight was all muscle. Then, a memory. Her own mother, years ago, using a log to pry open a croc's jaws. Zola's gaze darted to a fallen branch. Nagendra tightened again. Tumo's eyes rolled back. Flashback. Moonlight. Zola's first contractions. The herd circling her as she pushed Tumo into the world. His tiny trunk groping for her milk. Now, sunlight. That same trunk limp in the dirt. Zola's rage crystallized. She reared, her shadow swallowing Nagendra. The snake struck. Fangs grazed her leg, but she barely felt it. Arlo gasped. He'd never seen an elephant move so fast. Zola's trunk hooked under Nagendra's third coil. She pulled. The scale tore with a sound like Velcro. Nagendra writhed, but Zola didn't let go. Tumo sucked in a ragged breath. The snake's grip faltered, just for a second. False hope. Nagendra recoiled, then lunged for Tumo's throat. Zola intercepted, taking the hit on her shoulder. Blood welled. The scent galvanized the herd's distant echoes. They were coming, but would they be too late? The sound ripped from Zola's chest. Not a trumpet, but a seismic roar. Birds exploded from the canopy. Nagendra flinched. For the first time, doubt flickered in his obsidian eyes. Zola seized the moment. Her trunk snaked under Tumo, lifting him as her foot pinned Nagendra's kale. The balance was agony. One slip and Tumo would be crushed. Arlo's camera shutter clicked, unconsciously documenting the impossible. Tumo coughed, his trunk twitching. Nagendra's body lashed like a whip. Zola's legs trembled. She couldn't hold much longer. Then, a crack. Nagendra's tailbone snapped under her weight. The serpent screamed, a sound Arlo would later swear was human. Zola hurled Tumo clear as Nagendra's jaws snapped where his head had been. The baby landed in a patch of ferns, gasping, alive. For now. Arlo's breath caught. 10 years ago, he'd watched a lioness lose her cub to a hyena. That same hollow look was in Zola's eyes now. But this mother wasn't surrendering. She charged again, tusks aimed at Nyandra's spine. The snake dodged, hissing. Tumo struggled to stand, his legs splayed. Arlo's training screamed, "Don't intervene!" But his father's voice, a retired ranger, whispered, "Some things are worth the bullet." He raised his rifle. The scope wavered. Too risky. Zola's ear flapped blood where Nyandra had bitten her. The snake coiled for another strike. Then, a miracle. Tumo stood, wobbly but defiant. His squeal was pure fury. Nyandra hesitated. Zola's eyes met Arlo's across the clearing. In that second, he understood. This wasn't his fight, it was hers.
The crack echoed like gunfire. Nagendra's body went rigid. Zola had stomped his midsection with surgical precision. The snake's ribs splintered inward. Tumo trumpeted, a sound that summoned the herd's distant replies. Nagendra writhed, his grip on Tumo finally slackening. Zola's trunk whipped around her calf, yanking him free. The baby collapsed against her, his breath coming in whistles. Arlo exhaled. It was over. Then Nagendra moved. Broken ribs jutted from his scaled hide, but he lunged one last time. Zola spun, taking the fangs in her thigh. Her answering kick sent him flying into the lagoon. The water churned red. Silence. Tumo nuzzled Zola's wound. Her rumbling purr shook leaves from the trees. Arlo lowered his rifle, tears cutting through the dirt on his face. In 30 years, he'd never seen such will to live. Not in the animals, not in himself. Nagendra's mistake wasn't greed, it was memory. Last drought, he'd released a caiman to avoid injury. It cost him. For weeks, his empty stomach ate his own muscle. Never again. Even now, dying, his jaws locked on instinct. But Zola's love was stronger. She pried his fangs from her leg, each tooth leaving a river of crimson. Tumo pressed against her, his breath labored but steady. The herd's trumpets grew louder. Arlo wiped his brow. He'd report this as a predator deterrence. The truth, a mother rewriting nature's rules, was too sacred for paperwork. Nagendra sank into the murk, his ruptured organs staining the water. Zola watched until the last ripple faded. Then she turned to Tumo, sniffing his injuries. The baby's ribs were bruised, not broken. He'd live. The jungle exhaled. Somewhere, a butterfly landed on a blood-stained leaf. Life, relentless, went on.
Just as Zola relaxed, Tumo collapsed. His eyes rolled white. Foam bubbled at his trunk. Venom. Arlo sprinted forward, then halted. Zola's warning rumble shook the ground. She shoved her trunk down Tumo's throat, clearing his airway. Then, improvisation. She ripped a toxic-looking vine and mashed it with her molars, dripping the paste onto Nagendra's bite marks. Arlo gaped. Traditional healers used that vine for snake bites. How did she know? Tumo convulsed, then stilled. Zola's ears drooped. A single tear cut through the blood on her cheek. Then, a cough. Tumo's chest rose, his tongue lolled, but his eyes focused. Zola's triumphant bellow scared off the vultures circling overhead. Arlo stumbled back, humbled. Science said elephants couldn't use medicine. Science was wrong. The herd arrived at dusk, too late for the fight, just in time for the aftermath. Zola stood guard as they inspected Tumo. Aunts, sisters, cousins rumbled reassurances. The eldest female sniffed Nagendra's corpse, then touched Zola's wound with her trunk. Approval. Arlo retreated, his jeep's headlights cutting through the twilight. He'd keep this secret. Some truths belonged to the wild. Zola watched him go, then nudged Tumo toward a mud wallow. The baby resisted, until she demonstrated, packing clay onto her injuries. Tumo mimicked her, wincing. Smart, just like his mother. As stars emerged,
Zola hummed the same lullaby from his birthnight. The herd joined in, their vibrations traveling miles through the earth. Somewhere, a new anaconda tasted the air, learned the scent of elephant, and chose a different path. Zola's lesson would outlive them all.
Zola's ears snapped forward. Tumo's breathing had steadied. The venom's grip was loosening. She pressed her forehead to his. Just hold on. The herd formed a protective circle, their trunks gently probing his wounds. Then the miracle. Tumo's legs twitched. He rocked sideways, struggling to rise. Zola braced against him, her strength becoming his. One shaky step, then another. The matriarch rumbled approval, but Nagendra's poison still lurked in his veins. Tumo's eyes glazed over again. Zola's hope shattered like dry leaves underfoot. The herd's joyous rumbles died mid-note. Arlo, watching from the ridge, gripped his medkit. Should he intervene? Nature's law screamed no. His humanity roared louder. Tumo collapsed mid-stride, his body convulsing. Zola trumpeted, a sound so raw it sent hyenas skittering into the brush. She rolled him onto his side, her trunk frantically clearing his airway. The herd's eldest female stepped forward, sniffing the bite. Her resigned exhale said everything. Too late. Zola refused to believe it. She scooped mud from the wallow, packing it onto Tumo's wounds like a battlefield medic. Arlo's radio crackled. Backup's 20 minutes out. Useless. Tumo's breaths grew shallow. Zola's eyes locked onto Arlo's across the clearing, a silent plea. The ranger's hand hovered over his dart gun. One shot could ease the baby's passing, but Zola's next move shocked them all. She lifted Tumo onto her tusks, cradling him like a newborn, and ran.
The lagoon where Nagendra died rippled unnaturally. Crocs circled, drawn by the scent of serpent blood. Zola charged straight through them, her bulk shielding Tumo. Jaws snapped at her legs. She kicked, sending a 10-footer flying. The herd followed, a thunderous stampede of last resort fury. Tumo's limp body jostled on Zola's tusks. Then, a flicker. His trunk curled weakly around hers. Alive. The matriarch led them to a termite mound, where red clay, nature's antibiotic, caked the ground. Zola dropped to her knees, coating Tumo in the healing mud. Arlo's jeep skidded to a halt 50 yards back. He'd seen elephants grieve, but never this, a mother performing her own triage. The herd's rumbles took on a new rhythm, not a dirge, a chant. Silence. Then, Tumo coughed. Red clay sprayed from his trunk. His chest rose, fell, rose again. Zola's entire body shuddered with relief. The herd pressed closer, their trunks stroking his back. Arlo lowered his dart gun, stunned. He'd read about clay's detoxifying properties, but witnessing it was humbling. Tumo blinked up at Zola, his eyes clearing. She nudged him toward her belly, the universal sign for eat. He latched on, drinking like he hadn't nursed in weeks. The eldest female trumpeted, and the herd moved out, flanking the weakened pair. Arlo snapped a photo, the shot framed by golden sunset. It would win awards, but he'd never share it. Some stories weren't his to tell. As dust settled over the lagoon, Nagendra's body resurfaced, belly up. The crocs descended. Nature's cleanup crew. Zola didn't look back.
Moonlight painted the savanna silver. The herd paused at a baobab, its hollow trunk a ready-made infirmary. Zola guided Tumo inside, her bulk blocking the entrance. The others formed a living wall, no predators tonight. Tumo's fever had broken, but his ribs jutted unnaturally. Zola did something Arlo, now stealthily observing, had never seen. She licked his wounds. Her saliva, rich in lysozyme, staved off infection. Tumo sighed, leaning into her. The matriarch rumbled approval. This wasn't just survival, it was medicine. Arlo's eyes burned. His own mother had died without such care. He retreated, leaving his medkit by a termite mound. Let them find it. Dawn would bring new threats, but for now, the world held its breath. Somewhere, a lion roared. Zola answered with a warning even kings understood. This child is protected. Arlo's coffee tasted like guilt. He rewound the footage. Zola's tusks glinting as she hurled Nadandra. Tumo's gasp for life, proof of miracles. His boss's voice crackled through the radio. Poachers near Sector 7. Duty called. But the image of Zola's tear wouldn't fade. He'd spent 30 years believing humans were nature's custodians. Arrogance. The Jeep's headlights caught movement. Tumo, limping but alive, trailing Zola toward the river. The ranger killed the engine. They didn't need his light. The Milky Way arched above, indifferent to laws, labels, or lines on maps. Arlo turned the Jeep toward Sector 7, but his mind stayed in the baobab's shadow. That night, he radioed HQ with a lie: no casualties. The truth was too sacred to file.
2 weeks later, Tumo's ribs had knitted, mostly. A jagged ridge of scar tissue marked where Nagendra's coils had crushed him. Zola inspected it daily, her trunk tracing the raised flesh like a blind woman reading Braille. The herd's juveniles sniffed it too, learning. One afternoon, Tumo playfully splashed into the lagoon, the same waters where Nagendra had died. Zola tensed, then relaxed. Fear wouldn't rule him. Arlo, hidden in the reeds, adjusted his camera. The shot, Tumo's scar gleaming wet, Zola's reflection beside him, would become National Geographic's cover. He never took it. Some legacies weren't meant for frames. As the sun dipped low, Zola led Tumo away. His limp was barely noticeable now. But the scar? That would remain. Not as weakness, as a badge. The attack had changed more than Tumo. The marsh where Nagendra died stayed empty for months. Crocs avoided it. Birds skirted its shores. Even insects seemed to hum quieter there. Rangers joked it was haunted. Arlo knew better. Predators recognized sanctuary when they saw it. One evening, he found Zola standing vigil at the lagoon's edge, her trunk resting on Tumo's back. The baby was nearly weaned now, his legs sturdy. The matriarch rumbled something, part warning, part eulogy. Nagendra's bones gleamed white under the water. Arlo retreated unseen. Some rituals needed no witnesses. That night, rain finally came, washing the last of the serpent's remains into the earth. At dawn, a fish eagle cried. The jungle's voice had returned. Tumo, grazing beside Zola, didn't flinch. His mother had taught him, silence isn't emptiness, it's respect.
Elephants communicate in subsonic waves, frequencies humans feel as vibrations. That's how Arlo explained missing Zola's message, but Tumo heard it. On the morning they rejoined the greater herd, Zola pressed her forehead to his and hummed. The sound traveled through bone, not air. Remember this. Tumo's ears flapped in understanding. The matriarch led them east, where the acacia trees grew thick. Arlo, packing up his outpost, felt the ground tremble. He smiled. Some goodbyes didn't need words. Weeks later, tourists would report a young bull with a distinctive scar playfully herding calves away from lagoons. Rangers would nod, saying nothing. Legends didn't need footnotes. As for Zola, she stood taller now, her eyes holding secrets only mothers and survivors shared. The jungle kept her story alive in rustling grass and midnight rumbles. Some lessons outlasted lifetimes. Tumo's first solo charge at a jackal was clumsy. Zola watched, poised to intervene, as her son skidded to a stop just short of the predator. The jackal yipped, unimpressed. But Tumo's triumphant trumpet shook the savannah. He'd faced death and won. Zola's rumble was pure pride. That night, The herd feasted on ripe marula fruit, their celebration echoing for miles. Arlo, sipping whiskey at his new post, heard the commotion. He raised his glass to the horizon. Some victories belonged to the wild. As fireflies dotted the dusk, Zola nuzzled Tumo's scar one last time. No longer a wound, a reminder. The jackal, slinking back at dawn, took one look at the herd's formation and fled. Tumo didn't even lift his head. He was learning. True strength wasn't in the charge, but in the choice to stand your ground.
The transformation was breathtaking. Zola, who'd shattered small trees battling Nagendra, now used that same trunk to pluck thorns from Tumo's foot with surgeon's precision. The morning sun revealed fresh scars on both mother and son, their matching wounds telling a story deeper than words. Tumo nuzzled Zola's leg where fangs had pierced, his touch feather-light. The herd's juveniles watched, learning that true strength cradled as fiercely as it crushed. Arlo's binoculars trembled. He'd seen elephants grieve, but this was grace. As Zola led Tumo to mineral-rich soil, her gait slowed to match his limp. Not weakness, choice. The matriarch rumbled approval. This was how legends were born, not in blood, but in aftermath. Trumpets echoed at dusk. The main herd, over 20 strong, beckoned from the northern plains. Zola stood at the crossroads, torn between safety and solitude. Tumo leaned against her, still favoring his right side. The matriarch sniffed the wind. Poacher scent lurked north, but staying alone risked lion attacks. Arlo held his breath from his jeep. He knew what the statistics said. Orphaned calves rarely survived. Then Zola did the unexpected. She voted. A subsonic pulse rolled through the ground. Minutes later, 3 females broke from the main group, coming to them. The eldest inspected Tumo's scars, then touched trunks with Zola in elephantine accord. "We stand with the brave." Arlo's radio crackled with storm warnings. He ignored it. Some storms brought rain, others, redemption.
The lagoon told the story in bones. Nagendra's skeleton, picked clean by catfish, became a warning written in calcium. Young anacondas sliding past would taste the water and recoil. The very molecules screamed elephant. By the next dry season, something remarkable happened. A 12-foot python encountered Tumo drinking and fled. Not slowly, but in panicked coils. Zola watched from the bank, her ears flapping in grim satisfaction. The lesson had taken root deeper than jungle soil. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. Years later, researchers would document the anomaly. A 300% decrease in serpent attacks on calves in this territory. The report called it learned avoidance. The Maasai elders, stroking their spears, called it justice. And Tumo? He'd pause sometimes where the water turned shallow, sensing but not remembering, while Zola's shadow fell protectively across his scars. Arlo's hands shook as he developed the shot. There it was, Zola's tusks glinting mid-rescue, Tumo's body suspended between death and dawn. The perfect wildlife shot. He crumpled the print. Some truths deserved no witnesses. Outside his tent, a familiar rumble shook the coffee pot. Zola stood at the perimeter, Tumo beside her, whole. The ranger's breath caught. This wasn't chance, it was acknowledgement. He reached for his camera, then stopped. Instead, he offered a handful of wild melons. Zola accepted one, her trunk curling gently. Tumo sneezed, spraying Arlo's boots. The sound was so absurd, so alive, that the ranger laughed until tears blurred his vision. Later, he'd burn the negatives.
The world didn't need proof. It needed wonder. As they disappeared into golden grass, Arlo whispered the only epitaph that mattered. They lived.
The scar never fully faded. Neither did the lesson. At 5 years old, Tumo, now towering over Zola, stood guard when his cousin's calf wandered near a python's nest. His warning trumpet was pure Zola. The matriarch watched from a distance, her once black eyes now frosted with age. She didn't intervene. Leadership was a crown passed in silence. That night, as the herd slept, Tumo pressed his forehead to hers, the same gesture she'd used to share secrets. The wind carried their rumbles across the savannah. Arlo, now retired, would swear he heard it from his porch 20 miles away. He raised his whiskey to the stars. Some bonds outlasted lifetimes. In the lagoon, Nagendra's bones had long dissolved into the earth, feeding plankton that fed fish, that fed eagles. The circle, unbroken. Biologists would classify it as interspecies predation. The Maasai called it Enkai's test. But the herds? They knew the truth. This was a story, passed trunk to trunk, rumbled into the soil for generations. Calves born years later would startle at python scent, instinctively recalling a tale they'd never heard. Zola, now ancient, became a living monument. Tourists gasped at her size. Guides whispered of her scars. Tumo, a bull in his prime, once charged a jeep that came too close to her. The message was clear: respect your elders. Arlo's replacement, a PhD with fancy gear, asked why this herd thrived despite droughts. The answer rustled in the grass, walked on 4 legs, and bore the marks of a battle that redefined survival. Not just of bodies, but of spirit. The retirement party bored him. Someone mentioned dangerous encounters. Arlo smiled, fingering the scar where Zola's tusk had grazed him during a poacher raid, the day he'd been the one rescued. His toast silenced the room. We weren't their saviors. They were ours. Later, under African stars, he poured whiskey on the soil, libation for the wild that had humbled him. A distant trumpet answered. Could be any herd. Could be hers. Didn't matter. The lesson stuck. Courage wasn't in the fighting, but in the choosing. To protect, to remember, to bend but not break. His grandkids would roll their eyes at the story. He'd tell it anyway. Some truths were worth the eye rolls. Like scars, they lingered. Like love, they outlasted. The true teaching wasn't in the battle. It was in the 1,000 days after. How Zola would let Tumo stumble into thorn bushes, then demonstrate how to extract them. How her discipline came not in blows, but in firm nudges toward better choices. When a new mother in the herd smothered her calf with constant hovering, Zola did something extraordinary. She separated them, not with force, but by leading the infant on an adventure just beyond mom's sightline. The panicked mother's screams turned to wonder when she found them later, the baby expertly digging for tubers under Zola's guidance. Protection means preparing, the matriarch's eyes seemed to say. By the time Zola's final rainy season came, every calf in the herd could identify medicinal plants and read python trails. Her greatest gift wasn't survival. It was the courage to let go when the time came. Her last breath a soft push against Tumo's shoulder. Go. Lead.
Golden wings fluttered where the battle had raged, the same species Tumo had chased as a calf. Now a 6-ton bull, he watched them with ancient eyes. The lagoon had become a sanctuary, its waters clear, its banks lush. A baby elephant, his great niece, splashed fearlessly where Nagendra once ruled. Tumo's scar ached in the rain, a living memory. He trumpeted softly, a sound that carried Zola's name in its harmonics. The herd stilled. Then, as one, they rumbled, a seismic farewell to the mother who'd rewritten the rules. Arlo's replacement, finally understanding, ordered the reserve sign changed. Zola's crossing. No explanation needed. The butterflies danced on, oblivious to legends. Tumo turned north, leading the herd to new grasslands. His limp was barely noticeable now. But sometimes, in quiet moments, he'd touch the scar and the wind would carry a whisper only elephants could hear. Decades later, researchers published a shocking finding. Elephants near Zola's crossing lived 12% longer than elsewhere. The reason? Unusually low predator encounters. Locals laughed. They knew. The true legacy wasn't in statistics, but in the python skull displayed at the ranger station, its cracks matching Zola's tusk grooves. Tumo's descendants, scar-free but instinct-wise, still herded calves away from lagoons. Arlo's memoir, self-published and dog-eared, sat in a drawer somewhere, its final line underlined by his granddaughter. We thought we protected the wild. It protected us. On quiet nights, new rangers swear they hear twin trumpets, one deep, one calf high, echoing where no elephants roam. The old-timers don't correct them. Some stories don't need proof. They just are. Like love, like loss, like the unbreakable thread between a mother's roar and a son's promise, written in scars that outlasted bones.